This is our homily for Sunday, October 15th, the 28th Sunday of Ordinary Time. A first grade teacher had asked her 6-year-olds to bring in a symbol of their religion. First, she called on Isaac, who stood up and said, "I am Jewish, and this Star of David is the symbol of my religion." She then called on Mary, who stood up saying, "I am Catholic, and this rosary is a symbol of my religion." Next came Bobby. "I am Presbyterian," he said, and held up a casserole dish. Have you ever noticed how often food and drink are mentioned in the New Testament? How about banquets and weddings? In our gospel for today, Jesus compares the kingdom of heaven to a royal banquet, and our readings today tell us all are invited without exception. But we have to cooperate. We have to accept and wear the wedding garment. This parable is the last of 3 that Jesus addresses to the leaders of the Jewish people, only 2 days before he's arrested. The first was the parable of the 2 sons, one who said he wouldn't do the Father's will but then did it, and the one who said he would but didn't. And by saying prostitutes and tax collectors were getting into heaven before them, Jesus made sure that the religious leaders got his point. The second we heard last week, the tenants who murdered the landowner's son. Now we have the elite of the community, the religious leaders, invited to the wedding feast of the king's son, but they blow off the invitation and refuse to come. Quickly, the focus changes from just the elite or leaders to all. When the invited guest refused to come to his son's wedding, the king sends his servant to invite all from the highways and byways. This concept of all being invited is reinforced by the first reading, where we hear all people twice, all nations, every face, and the whole earth. All people of all time are called to the banquet. Every single person has been redeemed by Jesus Christ and invited to the banquet of the kingdom. But there's a condition. We have to have the proper wedding garment. When I first heard this parable, I thought the king was being a little crazy. If I'm out doing errands, like shopping for food, stopping at the post office, getting a haircut, I'm not going to be dressed in my tuxedo for a wedding. How can he be angry? Well, the reality that Jesus' listeners would have known is that wedding garments were passed out at the door to the banquet hall for those who did not have one, so that every guest would be properly clothed. In other words, the man had been given the proper attire, but chose not to wear it. And this puts a different spin on the story. So what is the point for us? We have been called to the banquet. Jesus has saved us and invites us to his kingdom, but we need to wear the wedding garment. That is, we need to live a life of gospel values. That is why regular attendance at Mass, listening to the readings and homily is so important. It helps us understand more and more the gospel values and manner of living that Christ taught and modeled for us. One summary is the Beatitudes. Another could be the Last Judgment Litany. One of my favorites is in Paul's letter, no bias here, to the Colossians. Paul even uses the image of putting on as we would put on special clothes to go to a wedding. And I quote from Paul's letter to the Colossians, "Put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, heartfelt compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another and forgiving one another if one has a grievance against another. As the Lord has forgiven you, so must you do also. And over all of these, put on love. That is the bond of perfection." End quote. Let me repeat, over all these, put on love, the bond of perfection. I end with a story that was said to be true. A woman took her 4-year-old granddaughter, Amanda, to the pediatrician's office with a fever. The doctor, joking with her to put her at ease, looked in her ears and said, "Who's in there, Donald Duck?" She said no, a little perturbed. He looked in her nose and said, "Who's in there, Mickey Mouse?" Again she said no. He put his stethoscope on her heart and said, "Who's in there, Barney?" Amanda replied, "No, Jesus is in my heart. Barney is on my underwear." If Jesus is in our hearts, our lives will be clothed in proper apparel: faith, hope, love, forgiveness, tolerance, and all the virtues of Christian life. And we will fit in perfectly at the wedding feast, for we will be properly dressed. Let us support each other by prayer and example. God bless.